To be clear, then you think there's nothing wrong with the president continuing to ask and having his personal lawyer continue to ask for investigations into Joe Biden and the Democrats?
I think it is perfectly within the authority of the president to investigate corruption and to investigate corruption with allies. We're doing it every day. And by the way, we did it every day under Barack Obama, under Bill Clinton, under George W. Bush. The U.S. Justice Department cooperates with the Justice Departments. You know, when I was at DOJ, I flew to Rome to meet with the Council of Europe, to meet with Justice Departments all throughout Europe, focusing on cybercrime. That's a big part of how you enforce the law. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can cook up fraudulent attacks on your opponents. This would be a very different allegation if someone was saying, if the president had said, please concoct something that isn't real, that would be qualitatively different. That's not what the transcript says. The transcript says, investigate what happened, find out what happened. And the House Democrats, they don't want to find out what happened. They stopped Republicans from calling Hunter Biden. They wanted no witnesses who would say anything to disrupt their narrative. And it's a one-sided partisan narrative that I think a lot of the American people are frustrated with and are ready to move on.
Well, that's it. The death of self-awareness. This is Ted Cruz saying on national television, I'm not suggesting you can cook up fraudulent attacks on your opponent. This would be a very different allegation if the president had said, please concoct something that isn't real. That would be qualitatively different. Now, for those just born onto this earth, that is what Trump did. Trump predicated his request to Ukrainian President Zelensky on the false pretense that Joe Biden had fired a prosecutor to protect his son. That is unequivocally untrue. Biden's opposition to the corrupt prosecutor, Cohen, was in alignment with the United States government, with the European Union, with the International Monetary Fund, with anti-corruption advocates in Ukraine, and even Senate Republicans who signed a letter supporting it. The entire world agreed that this prosecutor was corrupt and needed to go. So unless Republicans are insinuating that the entire world, including their own caucus, was in cahoots with Joe Biden to protect Hunter, then what they're saying is complete BS. I mean, the extent to which Republicans can make indictments of Trump with zero acknowledgement that they're doing so is just staggering. Kevin McCarthy indicted Trump when he thought that a journalist added the incriminating word "though" to the transcript, only to find that Trump himself said it.
What do you make of this exchange? President Zelensky says we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes. And President Trump replies, I would like you to do us a favor, though.
Well, you just added another word.
No, it's
you said,
in
I'd
the
like
transcript.
you to do a favor, though?
Yes, it's in the White House transcript.
Lindsey Graham implied how bad it would be in the event that the president was threatening to cut off aid unless Ukraine investigated Joe Biden, and that luckily something that egregious didn't exist, even though we would eventually learn that that's exactly what he did.
If you're looking for a circumstance where the President of the United States was threatening the Ukraine with cutting off aid unless they investigated his political opponent, you would be very disappointed. That does not exist.
And now we have Ted Cruz saying that if Trump had said, please concoct something that isn't real, that would be a different story, when that is exactly, to a T, what happened. Cruz even defends the idea that the United States would investigate corruption with allies, ignoring the fact that we already did. Cohen was a corrupt prosecutor who the entire world, including our allies in the EU and at the IMF, investigated and found was corrupt. That's precisely why he was being ousted. And of course, Ted Cruz brings up the false equivalency that what Trump did, which was to embroil himself in an international extortion scheme, was justified because of a baseless accusation about Hunter and Joe Biden, for which there is no evidence of criminal behavior. Only this entire tenuous defense was already debunked because A, Trump proved it wasn't about corruption when he failed to mention corruption on the phone call that was supposedly about corruption, and B, Trump didn't even care about the investigation were it to go forward. He only cared about the announcement of the investigation, which Gordon Sondland, a first-hand witness, testified to under oath.
But he had to get those two investigations if that official act was going to take place, correct?
He had to announce the investigations. He didn't actually have to do them, as I understood it.
Also, if Republicans were so concerned about Hunter Biden, this random American citizen working for a natural gas company on the other side of the planet, you'd have thought that they'd have said something at least once during the 2 years that they were in charge of Congress. At least once before Joe Biden announced his candidacy. And yet it just so happens that this instance of egregious corruption, an example of corruption so horrific that they're willing to hang Trump's entire impeachment defense on it, only became worth investigating when Biden jumped into the race. How convenient and totally believable. Cruz goes on to say that on the issue of Giuliani yet again traveling to Ukraine to continue to prop up the sham investigation that's getting Trump impeached in the first place, that nope, it's definitely not a crime in progress. This is all just Schiff and Nadler interested in partisan attacks and that they don't actually care about corruption. If the GOP was any less self-aware, they'd stop seeing their reflections in the mirror. To be clear, Cruz is claiming that the Democrats don't care about corruption in defense of a White House that didn't even bother to mention corruption on any call with Zelensky while supposedly predicating those calls on corruption. All the Republican Party is doing at this point is just regurgitating valid arguments from the left and pretending that they said it first. So Ted Cruz can continue to run cover for Trump, but his failed defenses aren't so much moving the needle in the president's favor as they're showing just how low he can personally sink in his blind deference to a criminal.